Oh, hi. Can't hear you.
Okay, there we go. Hello.
Hi. Am I the only person?
So far.
Right now, yeah.
Okay.
Cool. Thanks to our good talk.
Yeah, I don't know. I might talk with Tess more specifically about logistics.
We're ending another conversation and we'll start this one.
Because I'm gonna have questions just from the notes, since I do nothing.
That's a lot we can talk about.
Who else needs to be part of this conversation?
Yeah,
No, this is Courtbot. If you want to join for Courtbot.
You should say that louder. I'm not sure they're being.
And since we're on a group call, I'm going to take this off. Can you hear us, Ian?
Yeah, I could, but it's not super clear from like the conversation that you guys have over there.
Yeah.
And let me ping.
Probably just stick with one since that's what heard of this. I've heard of this, so.
Study is not a peer reviewed.
Is that better?
Yeah, definitely. Let me
Okay.
ping people and also send the Zoom information for them. So I think everybody has signed on to this, but it's just all right. Okay. Oh, so you guys have a really nice facility. I don't think anyone on like the San Jose side started meeting in person.
Yeah, we're at the Holbertson Coding School, and they're actually moving their headquarters from the Bay Area to Tulsa.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. That's great. Spreading the Bay Area tech
Yeah.
a little bit. So, yeah. All right. So I don't know how late it is, but I guess we could get started if people are want to are ready. Cool.
Oh, sure.
All right.
Yeah.
So
we ready to do introductions really quick.
sure.
So I'm Diana Barnes. I've been acting as the project manager for Courtbot for a while. Yeah.
Yeah. Who are you?
Oh, sorry.
Okay, this is my name. My name is Yaya Lazak. I'm developer, Synchronops.
And I'm Luke. I'm also been involved in code with also for a long time.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Seon. I've been involved with Code for Tulsa for like 2 years, but I've taken over the Courtbot related things, especially in regards to taking the text bot into an AWS and then trying to generalize this to the rest of the brigades.
Okay. Great. So I'm Ying. I'm from Code for San Jose. And we just started, well, it's not just started, we started around September this year to figure out how we could use Courtbot for Code for San Jose. Initially, we were thinking that the main concern we might have is data scraping, but when we were initially we were trying to adopt Tulsa, but we were not getting a lot of answers. So there was thoughts within our brigade to decide, okay, do we want to implement our own? And then we kind of went off to the deep end of trying to hash out the implementation and deployment and things like that. But then Annie on our PM side basically was like, no, you guys need to sync up with Diane because they say their Courtbot is integrated and extendable. but the problem that I have been having is that I wasn't able to get a confirmation from your team to say, is it really ready for integration? And from when I look at the code itself, it doesn't look like that implementation is available. So I just want to know what is the status of generalizing it, as well as how ready it is for teams to sign on to, just focus on the data part. And also, maybe you guys are looking for people to collaborate. And in terms of workload, and as long as you have very specific things that you want us to help, then that will be super helpful, because right now we're being asked to look into reuse. And we also had a discussion with the Vermont Courtbot team, who also kind of spin off their version of the Alaska Courtbot. They mentioned that their implementation also is somewhat extendable. So right now we're trying to decide whether you guys have the intention to really push for that integration, or we go with the Vermont team, since they also were looking for people to collaborate.
Yeah. Oh, would you like to introduce yourself? Paula?
Hey, hi. So my name is Palak, and I'm working for Courtbot San Jose for about 2 months. And Courtbot is my first project, and I'm doing the project management, product management role for Courtbot. So, yep, that's about me.
Yeah, I started as the project manager, but Annie added another project manager, but we were short on developers, so I switched over to help with development. So
Awesome. We did talk to people at Vermont, so I should probably sync up with them later again. So the question you asked was, is Courtbot ready to be integrated? The answer is yes, but it depends on what you mean by integrated. We have a separate repository that we pointed you all to, which is the Courtbot library. And that is the library that we would take in the different data sources, so different reports in this case, to then be used as a central place to then feed the Courtbot that we have that is hosted on Heroku, that is using AWS systems to do the check.
right. So right. So are you currently using the Courtbot library to use it as a source?
No. So currently the Courtbot Python, which lives under Code for Tulsa, is using OSCN. However, we did put in work to integrate the Courtbot library into the Courtbot, waiting on merging a different place. I forget.
Delaware?
Burlington?
Vermont?
Burlington. Was it not Burlington? Trying to.
I thought it was Burlington.
It was the Vermont team code that actually
Yeah.
provided the data,
Yes.
but they basically, I think there was a gap here, right? When you say ready, I don't think it's really ready because it's not being consumed. And when I look at the Courtbot Python code, you still you will extract out the OSCN, but there are certain assumptions in the Courtbot Python that is specific to data processing of the OSCN data, right? For example, the event structure, where you have like certain keywords that you're looking for and things like that. So there's definitely some changes in Courtbot Python that needs to happen in order to consume Courtbot library, correct? So how much time, what's the time frame do you think that would be available?
So if you're asking me for when can I get that done, it's really based on how much ability I have to volunteer for this.
Right.
It really is. I really think that it's a day's worth of work. Like I need to spend a day to make all of that happen. The transition from actually using the OSCN library to the Courtbot library is actually going to be not that hard. And I think it's something that if San Jose is interested in collaborating on, is something that we could get help from San Jose for. In terms to your mentioning of hey, the Courtbot library is not being consumed with Courtbot Python, was so that we can get Courtbot library in a mature state where we can start using that. And we did use a lot of help from Vermont to make that happen. And in that processes, I dropped out because I was the only volunteer and developer who was working on it. And in that process, we just stopped continuing forward. However, the desired state was that we do not have to reproduce the infrastructure work that you all in San Jose is going through, where you have to figure out, where to host, how to secure the data, how to make sure that the Twilio services are being paid for, or the AWS or whatever chatbot system set up to happen. And that is the intention. But if that doesn't work well for you all, then you all can always intervene and say, like, we'd like to do this in a different way and do what Vermont did, which is, host their own service and then make it extendable to other team as well. I would love to talk with Vermont to see how they made it extendable and see if there's something that we can do together to then reduce what I consider as
Overhead.
Yeah. Just like, I don't think there's a need to have to set up another website, another AWS
I agree.
account, or another Twilio account. And that's the overhead I wanted to take care of. And if San Jose is interested in helping us with that, I would be open for that conversation. And I have tickets that is ticketed out into Google Sheets and not put into GitHub. So we can have conversation helping me to put this into a format where a developer can just pick up and run with. But currently, like, unless I'm in a meeting right now, I don't have a large room to like drive the project forward.
I see.
So like the best place is to catch me in a meeting where I can make sure that my focus is in this meeting.
Right. I think that's fine. So I'll have to discuss with my team in terms of where we want to spend our collaboration. Of course, originally we were thinking of just modifying the Python Courtbot, the Courtbot Python. But when I was trying to set up a development environment to mimic that, I found that the information for setting up Amazon Lexbot, the conversations and how you're hooking up your Lambda was not even documented within Git. And so we don't know what conversations that the bot is actually responding. So that makes it really hard to reproduce and actually help. So that was one of the things that sort of kind of like, okay, I'm slightly stuck during the deployment of trying to implement or even help.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point. The documentation of AWS Lambda would be helpful. I think we looked into trying to figure out if there's a way to have the configuration be stored in the GitHub so that we can have it auto deploy from GitHub into the AWS. But the ideal state that I would like us to be in for integration is that when other brigades join us, they do not have to worry about the way the AWS is set up. So we can break down the work in a place where we can talk about data scraping and how we can make sure that it is in a consumable format where it's easily consumed by the Courtbot Python, right, through Courtbot library. And then that is detached from how the AWS will handle the conversational bot, which is to make sure that when user comes in a text or in like a bot on a messenger or a Slack, it works seamlessly, right? So the work can really be divided into these like small focus groups, which I think will be better for volunteers rather than being spread across multitudes of different apps and different services and different configurations to make this happen.
Yeah,
right?
I do agree, especially when brigades will contribute to the Courtbot library, as long as we're very clear what kind of data structure the team needs to provide. What I'm going by is that if we want to help with Courtbot Python, those information will be necessary. So that will be something that we will need help if we are going to pitch in and help with the Courtbot Python. But I see I forgot your name next to you, the gentleman is trying to say something. Sorry.
That was earlier. I was going to ask, are you all 100% volunteer like we are?
We are 100% volunteers, yes.
Yeah.
And so for this to be like, if you want to consider it ready to use, like one of the things that, because we're all volunteers, like if for some reason something goes down, like we don't have anybody who's on like pager duty or anything to keep it up all the time. So you're not talking when you want it to be like ready for integration. You don't mean like you need it to be, 99.9% reliable or anything like that. You just mean like ready to. Okay. All right,
No,
wow,
what I meant is that when it's ready for integration, anyone who wants to contribute any brigade should just integrate at the Courtbot library site rather than still having to fix the Courtbot Python, right? Because that piece is not there yet. Okay. Yeah. I don't expect this to be 24/7. That's crazy.
So I think one of the concerns that you raised, which is in regard to the AWX documentation, I think is a very valid concern. And we can do this in many ways. It really depends on, are you looking for to be like more deeply connected with us in a sense, like we can go ahead and create a running meeting that goes on to talk about the current setup of everything so that you all can help us maybe do documentation because this was such a project that was just within here in Tulsa, and the way we had gone forward with it was we were always focused on how to make the data be a consumable thing to a Courtbot Python and not how it should be, I guess, like configurable on the AWS Lexa Lambda. And I think the gap in the conversation right now is that the lack of documentations and the configurations available in the Lexa Lambda is making it hard for you all to contribute with us. Am I hearing that correctly?
Well, it's more of the AWS themselves has good documentation on how to use Lex and Lambda, but your specific bot in terms of the conversation and how it's handling, it's not clear. So if you would just provide like a screen cap of the inputs, the outputs, and that kind of stuff, at least we could set up a bot that mimics that, right? Right, because you have the Lambda function that you already provided in there. So I could create Lambda. Basically, I could create AWX Lambda function, and we could also use that opportunity to review the conversation to see if there are gaps. For example, I don't know if you would ask for which state that, for example, I don't know if your Lexbot will ask the user what state they're coming from on the get-go, because that will be information that your Courtbot Python actually needs to know in order to figure out which Courtbot library to use, right? So that is a question, where is that input coming from to feed into the core Courtbot Python to delegate to the correct library?
Yeah, so to that, I have multiple solutions for. I have a sequence diagram that pretty much does a sequence call on what's the user interface and then how it works out in the backend calls. Do we lose Palette? Was there a comment?
Yeah, she had to leave. I think she said she had to drop early.
Oh, okay. So I have a sequence diagram that pretty much has, what is being inputted from the user and how it's being converted in the backend, including the AWS, right? So there is some kind of documentation there in regards to how does the Courtbot Python talk to the Lex and Lambda. But I was just checking right now, on the Courtbot Python repository under Code for Tulsa, there is lambda function.py.
Yes, but that's the Lambda function, not the bot conversations, because the conversation.
And what we seem to need is the documentation between where in the Lex talks with the where in the Lambda. So I think I can definitely get a screenshot of how that configuration happens. Yeah. But it can also be done by, have you tried sending a message to the number by any chance?
I did, but it failed at some point. it got stuck at some point and doesn't know how to answer. Okay. So there are definitely some bugs I found while I was testing Lambda, but it didn't ask me for which state. So I'm thinking you would definitely need that information somewhere.
Yeah. So I think it's important to maybe put a context in how this came out to be. Initially, we started this project with only accepting courts or cases from Tulsa. And then we decided to expand this to other counties here in Oklahoma. And then for that, what we're doing was exactly what I think other brigades are doing with Courtbot, which is they're spinning up their own instances, they're creating their own Twilio numbers and whatnot. And so it went from a single county to multiple counties. And then I saw that there was not a need to do the same thing for all the different counties and instead just make it into an entire state. So the level up from what it was from a city, which is Tulsa, to the rest of the counties in Oklahoma. And then I took those learnings to say, I think we can do the rest of Oklahoma, then we can also take it to the rest of the states. And the reason why we do not ask the state question is because the number that we are providing right now is just for Oklahoma. And the people that we share the numbers to knows that it's only for Oklahoma. However, like you mentioned, as soon as we have the switch over to the Courtbot library, and it's now including different states, then one of the first questions should be states, like you said. And the thing that I would personally really like is to have someone like map out that interface or interactions between the users, right? Like, what do you think is the most intuitive thing for users to come in and say when they first come to us? Because right now, the way that Lambda knows the intention of the users is by saying, give me case information, right? Or maybe what we should expect from users is like, I need information about cases in a state, right? And so immediately parse it from there rather than having, the conversation then ask you, what state are you in? So before we say immediately, yes, we need the state, which I do agree. I think it's a question of like, well, how can we add the state question, or should that be included in the very first conversation when the message is being sent to us?
Okay.
And I think as a developer, I could just say like, yeah, here we can ask the state. But right now we didn't have the need for that because it's only for Oklahoma.
Right.
So once we include Vermont or once we include San Jose, I think it makes a good use and a use of volunteer resources to then say that someone needs to go back to Lex and Lambda and change that.
Right, but in order for us to get on board, that would be the first thing that needs to happen, right? Because otherwise we can't use it.
Yeah, so basically, like if we send you the Lex, all of the prompts and the intents that it understands, and then if we just work on adding another one that's like what state, because right now if you just say case at Courtbot, it'll ask you what county.
Right.
And what would be nice is if we supported both. So like if we just say what county is it in, and somebody says a county that's in Oklahoma, or somebody says a county that's in Vermont, or somebody says a county that's in San Jose, if we could just figure out which one of those it is without having to ask them so many questions,
Right.
Like we could do it both ways. We could say, hey, tell us where, like the really ideal prompt would be where was the case? So and then you could say California, or you could say the name of a county, and Courtbot should just figure out. Like that would be the ideal one. But we can always add another prompt on the Lex side that says what state. Yeah. Once you say the state, now it says what county, then it says what year, and then it says what case number. So yeah, we can definitely do that. Like it's just another thing that we would have to do to it.
I think before we go maybe too much into the detail, I think you all are telling me that you need the configurations, which I can provide for sure. But I guess what I was trying to say is that that for the Courtbot Python to consume the information from Courtbot library, you don't need to worry about the integrations from Lex to the Courtbot Python, because the Courtbot Python will handle the interactions with the Courtbot library. I mean, Courtbot and the Lex and Lambda, right? So like, as long as the information is available in the format that we were discussing on the Courtbot library, then the Courtbot Python will do the right massaging and answering for the questions on the AWS and Lex and Lambda.
Or we can make it.
Right. So I guess that's what I was trying to say is I don't necessarily want you all to think that the data should be based on what the Lex and Lambda is, because the Lex and Lambda is actually fitting into what Courtbot Python is doing. And consider Courtbot Python to be the middleware or the middle service that actually does all the handling, because the AWS Lex and Lambda, all it does is it just takes the text and then
yes, I know what they do. I don't know what's the concern though. I mean, you're saying, so I understand Lex and Lambda, they're just interfaces for users to extract input. That's what I understand. That's what it does. Courtbot Python takes those input and figure out which library to load. That's what it wants to be, right? It doesn't do that now, right? So Courtbot library will provide a library specific to the state. That's why my discussion is more like we need some way to extract the correct inputs so that the Courtbot Python knows how to massage the data to get to the next point. So that that I understand. If you're reiterating the same thing, that's why I understand as well. So
Sorry, I was trying to say the reverse, right?
the reverse, okay.
Like right now, you all are saying is that you need the AWS and Lex and Lambda to ask the question of what state to then proceed to the next thing about massaging the data. But what I was saying is that if the data is given to us, then we can feed the Lex and Lambda to make sure that the data that is provided is being utilized properly. Does that make sense? Am I saying?
So what do you mean? What data
We could
though?
update Python to ask for the state.
Right.
We could do both of them in tandem.
Yeah.
Like, so we can always add for the bot to ask for the state first.
Right.
We can always. do
And then
that.
just say that
And
if
both
you're
of these,
not in.
you could work on either one without having to wait on that one.
Right, is
So
what
if
I'm
you all
trying to
wanted
say.
yeah, so if you all wanted to add data from San Jose into the Courtbot library, you should be able to do that. Just assume that we're also going to add a prompt for the state to the Courtbot Python. And then we'll be able to pass the state to you as well.
Right, I understand.
Yeah.
So
I think it's just a matter of either one of
right,
those things.
because we're
happen.
in the discussion of how do we help you to get to Courtbot Python so that it could consume Courtbot library, right?
Yeah.
So
That'd be it. Yeah.
I think the person that I'm working with already has extracted data for Courtbot library from
Okay.
San Jose, right? Because San Jose actually provides the API. Now we ourselves need to massage the data to make sure it's the format that you need. As I mentioned, Courtbot Python has some data massaging itself, right? So those functions need to move to Courtbot library to make it uniform. So every state could say, I massage my own data to extract whatever dates that you're looking for.
Yeah.
That part, I'm kind of like, I think there's some bits and pieces of that needs to move over to Courtbot library. Right. So I'm not concerned about Courtbot library, but maybe once we really start integrating, we'll hit some issues. But it's really hard to test. Right. So right now is that if we set this up, we can't really see it working in any sort of way unless Courtbot Python actually is available. So the thought is that we pitch in to help with Courtbot Python, which then we would assume that certain data will come in for Courtbot Python, and that's what you're saying. We don't have to worry about that data because then Courtbot Python will have the data it needs to parse the information to get to the correct library. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's what we'd want to do. And I think so. It sounds like what we really like the first steps are, we can send you like screenshots of the Lex intents, like the configuration that's in Lex. So here's all of the prompts that it understands.
Right.
Here's how it turns those into things that then are called eventually over to Courtbot library.
Right.
And then separately, we also need to add to that configuration a prompt for the state, and then have the state basically be one of those inputs that flows through Courtbot Python over to the Courtbot library. If we have those things up and going, and then the goal here is so that you'd be able to end-to-end test, like you said. So you would have a way that you could say, the state is California, this is the county, here's the case number. Yeah, so it sounds like what you mainly need from us is the documentation on what the Lex does, all of the things that Lex understands. Then we need to add an additional prompt to Lex that asks about the state.
Yeah, I could probably hack in an additional prompt so that you guys could think about the better ways of asking questions, right? Because my goal is to see if I could just hack together something if I modify Courtbot Python to integrate with Courtbot library.
Yeah.
So if I could do that and be able to test it, I set up a Twilio. I used to work with Twilio before, so I have some money left, so I could play with those. so that's fine. And then I just sign up for a free Amazon account, so I have a few free Amazon I could play with, so that's great. So I think I could definitely set up this stuff. I think at least a test version, I think.
So the I will look for the way to share information from the Lex and Lambda.
Okay.
Meanwhile, I'll try to get it tonight. But meanwhile, the other way to look at this is, how many counties does San Jose have, and is San Jose trying to shoot for all of California as well, or is it just the specific counties under San Jose?
We're going to start small to make sure it just works. We'll start with the Santa Clara County. The other counties where it's not clear how those data are extracted because the court systems are slightly different. So we'll start with something that we're aware of and then go from there.
And then the other thing to talk about is, do you all already have a unique way of identifying cases right now?
So the case numbers are interesting. They kind of get converted under the covers. So yes, I think they are unique, but I could verify that.
Okay, so one of the things that I can propose right now is, if you all already have a way of, if the data is already massaged on the San Jose side of things, sitting on the Santa Clara County, we can actually go ahead and merge what you have on the Courtbot library. I can go ahead and change the things in the Courtbot Python to consume the Courtbot library instead of the OSCN, and act like the Santa Clara County is another county that is available in Courtbot.
Oh,
without having to worry about at all how does AWS configuration work, right? And we can start testing there, right? And then meanwhile, we can parallel that with, what is the best user face to do? And I can also try to figure out how to add another, I'm sure it's another prompt to, handle, what state are you from, and then choose what county you're from. Because one of the things I did want it to do is that I wanted to list all the counties or cities or ports that are being accepted for Courtbot, to then have what Luke mentioned, which is a single prompt to say, I need information from, Santa Clara. And it smartly says, okay, we have Santa Clara County available from California and maybe Oregon or something, because people have naming problems.
Right.
And then we can, help the user going forward like that. But that's what I was trying to do, was to help you all get unblocked as soon as possible without having to wait on these more details.
Okay.
But I think, go ahead.
Okay, I think we could do that. The other thing is that the events data structure, you guys are looking for a particular keywords in the events. I don't know if our Santa Clara data does not look like that, and we will have to insert like these kind of arraignment date to match what you guys are looking for in the Courtbot Python in order to hack that, right? That's sort of the thing that it was like, oh, you guys are processing data in your current code.
Yeah, so I would be open, honestly, for any of your engineers or people at San Jose to say like, hey, instead of using the word like arraignment date, it would be nice if we use some more general term like date. It's also just the problem with that is the term date is also a very overloaded term. Like it depends on, is this the date that this case was changed versus is this the date where the person needs to come versus is this the date that it was decided on, right? So I am open to this conversation, and like your the person in the San Jose team are welcome to either file an issue or just create a pull request. And I will do my best to make sure that the pull request is reviewed and merged in a timely manner.
Okay. Yeah, that's cool.
But like I think what I'm also hearing is that maybe what we could do is, if San Jose could start out with either an issue or a pull request to the Courtbot library, right? And list all the questions and concerns on, any like written format where I can go ahead and do it in comments. It would help me greatly because GitHub is a much easier place for me to interact with rather than answering these questions on email.
Okay, that's fine. We could do it that way.
If that's okay. But I think what I will do as a thing that came out from today's meeting is I will try to get a screenshot of at least the configuration that is happening at the AWS Lex and have it sent to you all in the email thread. And then is there another thing you would like me to do in addition to that that would be helpful to San Jose?
I think we will have to, I think there are some questions with the data, and because you guys probably have court data that says arraignment dates, right? In particular, our court data is slightly different. And so we will have to see how, because we know we could scrape data, we just need to structure the way you need it. And then the thing is that we need to understand what date format. I mean, ideally, if you create like a JSON object that has a date that's already parsed, might be easier than parsing a string that has an event in arraignment dates, right? But there might be some data questions that I'll have some questions about. I know that Ray was working at the data extraction, and then he was like, well, how do I test this? So that's where we kind of got stuck. And then I said, okay, let me see if I could spin up a copy of the Courtbot Python and at least see it work. So that's also where we got stuck too. But yeah, I think I don't, so the unfortunate thing is that I also just started a new job because I think when I started volunteering, when I started volunteering, I was kind of in between, but then I was like, oh, I'm not really doing much. So now I'm a little busier. So that's why, I mean, I would like to figure out and then kind of get it going, but we'll have to see how much cycles between me and Ray, the two developer, we can actually do work on. So that's the unfortunate part, because I had more time before I started the new job.
So I realized that you all already created a pull request to Courtbot library.
Yeah, we did, but I've been giving Ray feedback on his Python coding.
Got it. Is that the pull request you would like to continue to go back and forth in the questions that you have?
I think I will do a more thorough review of his pull request to make sure the data structure fits what your team is looking for, because I was just kind of checking his syntax. I think I was doing a lot of syntax, just like general Python goodness or whatever coding.
Yeah. And I think another thing that I could do potentially to help is if I just go ahead and integrate the Courtbot library into the Courtbot Python right now, because I'm going through context again. I'm looking at the example case object in the Courtbot library, and it only uses the word date under the case object. So what needs to actually happen is in the Courtbot Python, which I think is what you were trying to say, is that there needs to be an update on the code call to use date instead of arraignment date, right? So
yeah, because you're scanning the event array list for the case, right? From what I was remembering, because your case object has an array of events, and during the event, you're just looping to find an event that has an arraignment date.
An arraignment date,
and then you parse the date string, and which is very kind of specifically parsing, right? But if we already have, because San Jose has, records we actually query, so it's not data scraping, so it's actually a nice JSON format. We don't have to generate, if you just need a date, that might be easier for us than creating a string called arraignment date or something like that. But maybe something for you to think about.
And once that happens, what I was going to say is that the Courtbot Python is an API endpoint, right? And the AWS Lex Lambda is hitting the API endpoint on the Courtbot Python. So one of the ways that Ray, I think is their name, could do the testing on is when they hit the API endpoint for case, right? And queries for the Santa Clara County case, it should be showing up in the format that it would show up for Tulsa, for example, right? And that is one way of testing to make sure that the end-to-end works as expected, is like when you, after I make the effort into converting the Courtbot Python into the Courtbot library, right?
Okay.
It's updating the Courtbot library into whatever the latest that you all are doing yours out of, and then hitting the localhost / the API endpoint, and then expecting that the court case information with the right amount of information is showing up properly. And there are test files in Courtbot Python for that, but I can also just send you a URL that, that you can hit to expect that if the right parsing and the right data is provided from the Courtbot library, and then Courtbot Python will present this data to AWS Lex and Lambda as expected on the Lex and Lambda side.
Okay.
Does that help as well?
That will be good. That will.
So it's not a complete end-to-end testing because you won't be texting the bot to then hit the API endpoint, but at least you can make sure the integration between what you have with the data massage into the Courtbot library will be working properly on the Courtbot Python, right? With the correct API. And if that works, then it is okay to assume that at that point, the Lex and Lambda will work as expected.
Okay. So we will focus on the Courtbot library. I think you said you're going to focus on getting Courtbot Python to consume the library.
Yes.
And then you'll send me the URL in which I could run Courtbot Python locally. And then have Courtbot library somewhere installed or something so that it uses that and then check to make sure that I have the expected data that you need. Yes, we can do that. And that will make things a lot easier.
Yeah, and it seems like from what Ryan said, Ryan is a Java developer. So there is a way to use the package from local instead of downloading the packages, which is what I would recommend going forward with this. But what I will do, if you can hold me accountable for this, Diana, is let me go ahead and start out with getting the screenshot of the Lex to you so that you at least have that to start off. And then I will take an action item, Diana, to make sure that the Courtbot library is consumed by Courtbot Python. Let's shoot for, let me check my calendar.
Yeah, I mean, anytime is fine. I'm going to focus more on the Courtbot library now because right now it's sort of like, okay, where do I go?
Yes, the Courtbot library is, I think, ideally where I would like all the brigades to go first. And then the Courtbot Python, like you mentioned, as long as it starts consuming from the Courtbot library, should not be like changed at all, right? And what it really needs to get changed is actually on the Lex and Lambda so that it does handling for multiple states and multiple counties outside.
Right. Okay.
So for me, I think the most reasonable thing that I could do.
We could meet again beginning of December.
Yes, and then I can try to get the Courtbot library consumed by Courtbot Python next Sunday, the 21st, the Sunday.
That's great. That's great.
And if I do not do that, you all have all the right to tell me, hey, you promised to get this done by the 21st. Can you please tell us what you need from us to get it done? Like, at least I will have a branch up so that someone can look at it and say, okay, this makes sense, right? And we can start this as a collaborative effort to say, like, you all can check me to make sure that what I'm doing makes sense to you all. And then I can make sure that someone is looking forward to my changes.
All right. So I'm going to look forward to your changes and then we will focus on getting the Courtbot library to the structure that at least currently I understand what you guys expect, but we will, if things need to change, we'll throw in some suggestions as to what additional changes that might be kind of like, maybe we'll hack it up so that it looks the same and then we could iterate and improve it when we get to it. Yeah, maybe let's do that.
That sounds good. Also, if you all ever get to talk with Code for Vermont again, please let them know I missed them. They used to be great and fantastic. It's probably my fault because I've been bad at communicating lately. But I know a lot of people there are very passionate with this, so I'm sure they're happy to help you as well if you decide to go forward with them. But if not, and if you're still willing to work with us, I'm really happy you're joining. I would love to talk with Code for Vermont again to see how they're doing too. So hopefully we can make you all a good place to reinvigorate this project because it needs some loving.
I guess maybe I'll write down what I learned into a document.
Yeah,
So,
no, that would be fantastic.
Because I dug through like the bits and pieces that you have. So maybe that would help. Maybe I'll put it on myself to help with the documentation.
Yeah, and if it works well for you and you're comfortable with GitHub, we can go ahead and start, creating a a folder under the Courtbot library to, document all the things that we talked about.
Okay.
So that other people who's joining, this project as well can see from your example and your thoughts and concerns to then say like, oh, it's kind of like an FAQ, right?
Sure.
It's like, here are the concerns I had, and this is how we answered it, right?
Okay.
And we can
Okay.
have that document live in a public space and
In
hopefully
your
that will also
Courtbot
help people.
Python
Yeah,
repo.
wherever you
Okay.
think is appropriate to have it at.
Okay. Yeah.
If that sounds good to you.
Yes, we could do that. Yeah, let me talk. I remember. So I talked to Co for Vermont last week because they happened to have a meeting and I was on their Slack. So I just kind of jumped in, and they weren't. So what they did is they end up going with the Alaska. They branch off the Alaska version and then decide to continue with JavaScript because they have a developer who has a lot of time, who is really good, who just loves JavaScript. So basically they went with the JavaScript and they were saying that they built it so that it is also extensible, but they don't use a Lexbot. They just use a web form. So it's basically fill out a form, get your answer, and that's it, right? So there's not a lot of the interactive chat.
Go ahead.
Yeah, but I see the benefit of using Amazon Lex. I see that it has actually like language options and things like that. So that will be very helpful for people who is familiar with other languages. So that's why I thought, but I think they're trying to simplify the deployment so that it's not different pieces over the place. Yeah. And AWS was I think it's pretty expensive. So they're like, let's not use AWS.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I wanted to take care of. One of the reasons I will say that we chose to do the text bot is because we realize a lot of the clients, the users who want to use this may not have access to internet. And that's why we wanted to do a text format, which is more approachable to users who may not have easy access to the internet. The reason why we have a form on our website is because we realize that our service does get used by nonprofits who are helping out their own clients as well. And they need a way to quickly and easily enter in these reminders. So that's why we technically, when it comes to our customers or clients or user base, we have two different kinds of users. We're really dealing with users who are constrained with resources and time and the mental ability to make sure this is happening, versus the larger organizations who may be using our services to make sure that their clients are going to court dates on time. And that's why one of the reasons why Luke asked this question is because we make sure it is known that our project is completely volunteer run, because like we do have organizations who uses our platform to help their clients out. So I'm glad you caught that on. I would love to talk with Vermont and work with their existing system to also support them on our system as well. Because the more it's like available, I think the better. But for now, I would like to focus in our conversation with you because you have helped us kind of reinvigorate this conversation and bring this project back to life. And I want to make sure that we do you justice and making sure that your code is livable and usable. So I will make sure that I have my deliverables, which is getting the Courtbot library accessible on Courtbot Python by November 21st. And I will have a test instruction available so that you all can test that the data available in the Courtbot library can then safely be consumed by Courtbot Python, which I think will at least help to make sure that the code works as expected.
Okay. So let me ask you just a few quick questions. You guys will store the case information as well as phone numbers, right?
So we store currently the case ID or the case identifier, and then the case date, and then the phone number. It's those three things that are being added.
And what happens, this is a question I asked Vermont as well, and the case dates do change. What do you guys do with that at this current?
We do not do anything right now. However, there was an issue that we filed to make sure we have a cron job that goes through the list of cases that are up for reminders to check in from the Courtbot library and Courtbot Python whether or not changes have happened and update those accordingly. So it is definitely something that we are we have kept in mind. It is a cron job, and it's a cron job and an additional Twilio interface behind, right? Because what should happen is that when the dates do change and we are able to identify that with the cron job, we should then send a text message to the user who set up the reminder to let them know that the case has changed, right?
Yes.
So that they can be updated with that information, verify that they have accepted that, and then continue to set up the reminder with the latest date, or we remove the reminder period, right?
Okay.
For whatever reason. So that is a very good problem that we need to fix. Right now, I don't have that capability to fix it, but I think once you and I, or once San Jose and Quit for Tulsa has a relationship going, we can continue to foster that change and make the service better. But I think it is, I already filed an issue for that.
Okay. Yeah, I was just wondering because I think someone told me that the dates could change, and I wasn't quite sure what's the path for change and reminders, right? Because people will get confused. And also, I think San Jose calendar is kind of weird as well, because you cannot get the information on date on a case more than a month out from what I have seen.
Yeah,
So,
and that was actually a problem with Vermont as well. And that's why they started, can you access all the historical cases?
sorry?
Historical cases. So like, can you access court dates as far as however long it has been in existence, or?
We could query it, but the dates for the arraignment. So there's a calendar data and there's a court case data. We have access, the court case data has, wherever it goes back, but the calendar data is only valid for against a certain set of probably up to a month. And basically it just happened to be whatever is assigned to whatever court on whatever date. So we have to do that correlation between the case number, and basically we'll have to check from the calendar data to see if that case number actually shows up. Now, the tricky part, of course, is that if a case that is not already set up in the calendar, we might not be able to actually set a date for the arraignment. And in that case, maybe you just sit there with like a future date of something. I don't know, right? But there's that piece that I have to look a little deeper into, because when I was digging through the data, Ray says that they're all there, but I haven't seen it. I prefer to see it. And then I said to say, okay, these are how the pieces are correlated before I'm completely sure that we could do the data thing that you need. But definitely it's sort of the calendar-based court day on which case. Yeah. Not the other way around.
Yeah. I have an idea on how to go forward with that problem, because one of the things that we could do is we can just say set up a reminder, it doesn't have to have a date, right? And along with the existing problem of the court case dates changing, we can always query, like once a day, for example, all the court cases that we have set up for reminders, and check to see whether or not an update should happen in regards to date, right? As long as on the Courtbot library side, the data isn't in a way where it accounts for those date changes happening, right? So it should always query to make sure the latest correlation between the court case and the court date is happening every time we hit the Courtbot library, right?
Yeah.
But I think with the existing system that I talked about before on how to handle for court dates changing, we can adopt for also court dates not set yet, right? Because it's pretty much a similar problem.
Yep.
One is a null value versus one is an existing date time value.
Right. Yeah. You could just take if the difference, if it's null, then say, hey, now you have a court date on this time versus.
Right.
So your date changed.
Yeah. But I think what you have mentioned, I think it would be great if it goes into the document about your documentation and what you learned or what you have thought about, right? And then we can make that as a one valid case, as like a feature almost, right? And one of the feature on Courtbot Python is, we make sure that court cases set up for reminder without court dates are responding in a specific way, right?
Okay.
Right.
But so that would be a feature enhancement.
Yes, I agree.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I
Okay,
think for
cool.
now we can focus on trying to make sure the happy case works, which is a court case has a court date and set it up for a reminder.
Yeah, okay. I will double check our data and then follow back up with Ray. And hopefully we have that data on the get-go, and we'll have to
Yeah.
figure out what we would do if there's none. So,
Yeah, and I think for now we're good here, but maybe a dummy data is always really helpful, right? So like, let me pause here. Let me think about how I can make sure so that, you know, other brigades joining in this is not having to go through this place of the gap in knowledge like you all are dealing with.
Yeah,
Because I
I
definitely
will
do
help.
think that there's improvements. that
Yeah.
can be made.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to help with the documentation with what we learned and of your and the integration, and then just
Yeah.
kind of put in what is still need to be done and just kind of document that, and we could update the improvements as we go. So
Great.
and then hopefully maybe we'll improve the documentation on Courtbot library as well on what kind of data structure to actually set, because I think it's also just a few things, and then I think it's still not complete. So we'll help with that as well as we build it out.
That sounds
Okay.
good.
So I have taken a whole hour of your time.
Thank you for doing that.
Please keep me up to date. We're looking for hearing from you on November 21st, and I'll relate what we discussed tomorrow with my team. I don't know if they're kind of getting tired of this, so hopefully they'll get re-energized.
Yeah.
And we'll go with that.
Yep. And I am going to look for the Lex configuration right now and send that to you.
All right, that would be great. I could play with it over the weekend or something.
Yeah.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ying.
Have a great one. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.